Well, good morning. Okay, you're kind of awake. All right. Try one more time. Good morning. All right, better. And for those of you online, good morning to you as well. Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to be here with you this morning to worship. Oh, thank you for welcoming my wife Natalie and our daughter Abigail here. My son Elijah right now is probably home and likely joining our home church's online service later on. And so it is always an honor to be able to worship with you here today. It was funny earlier, some people were mentioning, I'm from South Etobicoke, and some people are like, ooh, that's so far away. And yet we've got people from Texas. So I don't feel that bad. So so it is good to be here with you. And as we begin to delve deeper into this whole idea of, what does it mean to have this broader mission, right? What does it mean to proclaim Christ? And so one of the things that we're going to delve into, and that we read earlier, by the way, I feel bad for making Irina read 23 verses, and for all of you being able to stand and read along as well. But one of the things that as we look at this whole idea of Jeremiah, all right, this is one of the key verses that a lot of times we tend to get into. You're probably familiar with this verse for many of you, right? For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. And a lot of times when we look at this verse, this verse is meant to be an encouragement, right? A lot of times this verse is a verse that a lot of people take in, and for a lot of people, this is their primary passage, this is their life passage, because they come with this idea that God has this plan. God declares that I have plans to prosper you. Plans not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. And in some ways, there's a reassurance to that, right? In a lot of ways, there's a reassurance that, yes, God is there and God will provide and God will always be there. But I wonder sometimes if we've missed what this actually means. Earlier in this passage, in verse 29, it sets up the context a bit. And just to give you a little bit of a heads up on where this is. Because in this chapter in 29, it's written shortly after 597 BC. So if you're familiar with your history at this point in time, one of the things that happened over and over again was for decades, if not centuries before that, God kept on saying to the Israelites, the people of God, right? So these are the group of people that God called originally through a guy named Abraham. So through a guy named Abraham, through his descendants, God said, I'm going to establish these people. And through these people, I want them to demonstrate who I am and my love and grace for the world so that the world may be blessed. And so the problem, though, is that for decades and centuries, the Israelites kept on turning away from God. They weren't representing God properly. And many times there would be prophets who would be sent to them and saying, you know what, you've got to course correct here, you've got to change, or else there's going to be an exile. And many people didn't believe this. They were thinking, well, we're the people of God, right? If we're the people of God, nothing's bad's going to happen. Yeah, we might face some hardships here and there, but nothing bad can happen. I mean, this isn't true, right? And it gets to the point where the kingdom of Israel separates into two, the nation of Israel and the nation of Judah. And eventually Israel is captured and they're exiled. And now in 597 BC, Judah and Jerusalem is captured. And Nebuchadnezzar then takes people away. And there's this exile. And the thing is that if you read, especially in the couple of verses there, right? You read about how Nebuchadnezzar basically took all the skilled people. For those of you familiar with the book of Daniel, you might remember that in the book of Daniel, Daniel and his three friends, along with all the people who were educated, who were skilled, were taken away from Jerusalem to Babylon. Because one of the things that Nebuchadnezzar wanted to do was he wanted to take the best and the brightest for himself. He wanted the best and the brightest to work for him, and he left everyone else behind. He seems that he left people like Jeremiah behind because they were not considered good enough. And so if you get a chance, kind of read Jeremiah and Daniel together, right? Because Daniel is that guy that maybe you might remember from, if you've grown up in the church, you might remember stories of how Daniel in the lion's den, right? Daniel and the writing on the wall. This guy named Daniel. And if you look at the way he lived his life, there's something about how it parallels with our passage today. And so we get into Jeremiah 29. And as we read earlier, this was a message, this was a letter that Jeremiah had sent to the exiles, right? So the people who Nebuchadnezzar took to Babylon, because one of the things that they kept on hearing was, well, this exile, yeah, we got taken away, but it's not going to last that long. And so they kept on hearing from people over and over again, this is going to be like 2 years or less. And in less than a couple of years, we're taken away, but we're going to be back. Yeah, we were taken away, but we'll be back in Jerusalem in less than 2 years. And that was the mentality a lot of them had. There's these rumors that really this exile is not going to last that long. So don't worry, don't get settled, don't unpack your suitcase, just kind of live there, kind of be ready to go back, because pretty soon we're going to head back to Jerusalem. And yet, verse 5, this is what it says. It says, build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there. Do not decrease. Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And so at this moment, Jeremiah is already saying to them, this exile that you think is going to last less than 2 years and you're back, that's not going to happen. And so he says to them, which is a little bit counterintuitive, right? Because Jeremiah is saying to them, okay, you know what? Get settled. And not just like when you're going for a vacation, you get into your hotel and you just kind of, I don't know how you are. A lot of times when we go on vacation, usually I don't even pack my suitcase, right? I kind of leave my suitcase on the stand. I take things in, put things in, that's it. I don't get settled, right? And sometimes maybe if I feel a little bit adventurous, right, I'll take my clothes out and put them into the hotel drawer, right? Because we're going to be there for a little while. But Jeremiah is saying to the people, settle. Don't even it's not like you're going to a hotel, staying there for a little bit, and you're going back to Jerusalem. He's saying, actually, settle, stay, because you're going to be here for a while. Not just for a while, for some of them, for the rest of their lives. And it's interesting, he says here to them that it's not, because let's face it, when you get captured, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I know I really haven't. And some people in our world right now have, right? Whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's other places that we don't even hear about sometimes, where people are literally taken away from their homes, and that's it. They're gone forever. I could just imagine there's this resentment, right? This Babylonians, these guys, these people who ripped us out of our homes, who took us away, and now we're in this foreign place. What do? And you just see there's probably this resentment, right, of these Babylonians. I just wish something would happen to them. I wish something would happen to them so we could head back to Jerusalem. And yet Jeremiah says to them, pray for them. Pray that they will actually prosper. He says to them, settle down, plant your garden, right? Grow up your fruit, because you're going to be eating off of it. You're going to be here for a while, right? Have your sons marry some of the other, the daughters of some of the exiles, and have your daughters ready to be married to some of the sons of the exiles, because you're going to be establishing families here. You're not going to go away that quickly. You might as well start getting established. And in the midst of that, pray that this place that captured you and ripped you away, and now you're planted here, he says to them, pray that they would prosper. But you're looking at it going, what are you talking about? Further on, we get to the passage here in verse 10. And it says, this is what the Lord says, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise and bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope in a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. That word prosper there, that we're familiar with in verse 11, is this word shalom. And shalom is actually a very deep and rich word. A lot of times you might know, some of you might be familiar that this word shalom, a lot of times we translate it as peace. And yet, it doesn't do it justice. Peace sounds like it's almost like you're absent of any conflict. And yet, the word shalom here is actually much richer, much deeper than that. There's something about this word shalom that actually suggests it's not just about peace. It's not just about absence of conflict. It's about this deep contentment that resonates to your very soul. And so it's in this. And what's interesting about this is that when God says to them that I have plans for you, a lot of times we interpret this verse almost as individual, don't we? We read this and we're thinking, yes, God will prosper me. God has plans for me. And for me, there is going, he won't have me harmed. For me, there's going to be this hope in the future. And yet, if you look at the context here, he's actually saying it's for the people. But notice something here is that the idea is that it's prosper you, right? The shalom, this deep contentment is for you. But go back to verse 7. Who's it also for? It's for the people around them. So the promise of verse 11 here, this idea of shalom, this deep contentment, it's not just for you. But the question is, will it be extended to the people around you? Earlier, I mentioned Abraham. And some of you might be familiar with this. This is in Genesis chapter 12. He is God, when he talks to Abram, he has this promise. And this is from chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. The Lord says to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. See, his blessing was never meant to be just for you. You are not the end result of a blessing. If anything, the blessing is always meant to go to the people around you, to be extended to the people around you. That was the purpose from the very beginning. And so when you ask about this idea of prosperity, a lot of times you might have heard this term prosperity gospel being thrown around. And a lot of times this idea of prosperity gospel is, how will you yourselves be prospered? How will you receive riches? How are you going to make it? How are you going to have that foundation? How are you going to rest on your RSPs? How are you going to rest on your grade 12 grade so you can get into that great university to get that scholarship? How will God bless you? And yet we've missed the point if all you think about is, how will God bless me? You've missed it. Because the prosperity is not about you. It's about those around you. Even those that you don't like. To those who maybe you seem to butt heads against. To those who you seem to have this conflict against. To those who maybe, in some cases, maybe you felt that they've uprooted you. And now God is saying, I have plans for you. To prosper you and not to harm you, but not for your sake, but for the sake of those around you. It's interesting, in verse 15 to 19, one of the things that he makes this, Jeremiah then talks about the people who are left back in Jerusalem. Because some of the people who are left back in Jerusalem almost had this sense of smugness, right? Yes, we got overturned by Babylon. Yes, people were carried away to Babylon. But for those who are still in Jerusalem, really, we're the true people of God. Those who got exiled away, they're not actually the real people. That's why God took them away. And so those of us who are still in Jerusalem, we're actually the real people of God. And yet Jeremiah warns them. You might think that. I don't think so. He says, I've seen the ways that you act. I've seen that how you've turned and corrupted my ways, God says to them. If you think you escaped the punishment of exile, think again. In fact, it gets to the point where in verse 22 and 23, we read about these two prophets, Ahab and Zedekiah. And we read about how while they were proclaiming, and they were one of the ones who were also saying, this exile is not going to last that long. You're going to be back in Jerusalem before you know it. Everything will be just fine. And yet God says, actually, you might not want to listen to them, because not just what they say is wrong, but their very actions are contemptuous to what God is trying to do all along. In the Message translation, the way that they interpreted verse 22 and 23 says this, right? These two men, sex predators and prophet imposters, got what they deserved. They pulled every woman they got their hands on into bed, their neighbors' wives no less, and preached lies claiming it was my message. I never sent those men. I've never had anything to do with them. So perhaps this suggests a few things for us to consider. Who is the target of the prosperity around you? At the end of the day, if you were to take verse 11, and if you're going to hold on to that and anchor in your life, which is not necessarily a problem, but one of the first questions we got to ask then is that this prosperity, who is it directed towards? Who is the end target for? If you think it's for you, you've missed the point. If it's for those around you, God is saying, now you're starting to get it. In the midst of that, maybe you will gain some blessings too. But if you focus on the blessings just for yourself, you miss the target. So one of the first questions is, if God were to bless you, who else would you bless as an extension of that? Who will also prosper if you were to prosper? How will you extend what God's grace and love is to those who maybe don't even trust him, maybe have never even heard of him? How will you extend that? Something else to consider. Do your words actually match the words of Christ? And this can be a hard one sometimes. Because sometimes when we believe that we're actually speaking on God's behalf, there are times when we get so fixated on something that we actually miss the broader message. So one of the questions is, when you speak, are you actually speaking the words of Christ? That hopefully you're not like Ahab and Zedekiah here when God says that they claim that these are my messages, but they're not. So if you are claiming to speak on God's behalf, if you are claiming to speak as a Christian, if you are claiming to be a Christian and representing Christ, we need to make sure our words actually fit with who Christ is. Do your actions also fit with the actions of God? Or do we live in such a way sometimes that it's contrary to who God is? Because at the end of the day, over and over again, we are told to love. Now, the thing about love is this. A lot of times we think about this idea of love as, you're fine, I'm fine with you, we're all good. Here's what I would suggest as a definition of love. I'll see if you agree with this. I'm going to suggest that the definition of love is that you are trying to seek God's best for that person, even at your own expense. To love God is to seek God for who he is. To love yourself is to embrace what God's best is for you. And to love others now is to seek God's best for them, even at your own expense. So it's not just about, hey, what do you want? How can I help you? It's more than that. It's being consistently rooted in prayer, and you're constantly asking God, okay, God, what is your best for this person, even if I don't like them? And maybe even if it costs me something, but what does it mean to extend God's best to them so that they might prosper, so that they might experience your grace and your love? And maybe they've never seen that before. Maybe they've never known that before. And yet in the midst of that, you might bring God's best to them. Because God says, I have plans for you. I have plans for all of you. I have plans for my people. And ultimately, that promise rests on his presence. Because people over and over again were asking, okay, God, we got taken away, so where are you in this? God, we've been taken away, we've been uprooted, where are you in this? And God says to them that the hope that you have, right, when we read in verse 12 and 13, is that in 70 years, I will actually bring you back. Why? Because I am still here. Because at the end of the day, this shalom, this deep contentment rests on the fact that God is with you. That God looks to you and he says, I want to extend my best to you so that you might extend your best to those around you. And through that, I have plans to prosper you. I have plans that I don't want others to see harmed. I want others to turn to me, God says. Plans for hope that's rooted in his presence because he is here. And in that, may you extend it to those around you. So in a moment, I'm going to ask the worship team to come back and lead us in a response. So I'm going to give you a moment in silence here. Because I'm wondering at this moment if someone comes to your mind. I'm wondering, as we've been talking through this, what does it mean to have someone else prosper with God's blessing? How to extend that prosperity to someone else? Perhaps someone else has already popped into mind. Someone in your own sphere, or maybe even someone else that you're not even sure about right now. Maybe there isn't a name yet. And perhaps if there is already a name, maybe one of the questions in this moment of silence is to pray and ask, okay, God, what does it mean to extend your prosperity to them? And maybe no one's come to mind. Maybe one of the things you might want to ask is, God, help me to be ready to extend your prosperity to them. And so in that moment of silence, I'm going to ask you to take that time and pray. And maybe if you're not a Christian, maybe one of the things you might want to ask, okay, God, what does it mean? What is this prosperity you actually want us to experience? What does it actually mean? And if you're not sure, I'm going to ask you, ask someone that you know who is in this walk with Jesus. And maybe you might want to ask them, what does this actually mean? This whole idea of prosperity that's rooted in you, that gets extended. How does this all work? Ask those questions. In a moment of silence, talk with God. I'm going to step off, and then worship team, when you're ready, you can come back on and lead us in response. So let's pray. We thank you that your grace, Jesus, never stops with us. We thank you that your grace, Jesus, never stopped with the person before us, but rather through the people who have led us to you, through them, your grace is extended to us so that we might know you and be with you and to experience the deepness of shalom so that we might extend that shalom to someone else. And so in this moment, God, whatever name maybe has popped up, Perhaps in this moment of being ready to extend your prosperity and grace. Or maybe for some of us who have never considered what that even means. In this moment, would you speak to us as we speak with you?